Hey, what are you doing? You sitting there and reading? I've got a book recommendation for you. So I am really enjoying this book. It's written by Eddie DeGarmo, who's a founding member of DeGarmo and Key, of course, and he was also the guy who kind of ran Forefront Records and helped the world discover DC Talk. Anyways, I want to tell you some funny stories I remember from reading this book. I'm not finished with it yet. This is how far I am into it, so I'm not into the total business part. The subtitle is Faith, Business, and Rock and Roll. His story of coming to faith in Christ and just his childhood has some awesome, fun stories in it. And the band getting together, it's really interesting, and it's cool to see his influences and the whole Memphis soul sound that influenced what he did. One of the funny stories is in the early days, they went up in the Northwest and they had a special interview with a radio station. And the radio station had like locked doors, and they had a receptionist that, you know, made sure you had an appointment so you could get in, so nobody could just come in off the streets and get on the air back in the day. And the DJ reminded them, or told them, informed them that, hey, this is a real conservative station, you know, and we'll talk to you a little bit about your music. And do you have any, like a ballad on the record? They brought a copy of the vinyl record because the station didn't have one at that time. And they said, yeah, this song Wayfaring Stranger should do. It's kind of a gospel-inspired song. And he plays it and puts the song on, and then right when the guitar solo started in the song, the DJ leaped over Dana Key, scratched the record, and said, okay, now we're going to go to the weather and the news or anything real quick. And he said goodbye to the guys, and Eddie DeGarmo said in the book, you know, that was our first radio interview. I thought that went well. There's a story in here about him mowing the lawn. He was mowing the lawn. He was mowing some tall grass. He did a wheelie with a lawnmower. He's about to mow into this tall grass that was totally overgrown by this bush. And he heard a voice say, Brecken's in there. Brecken's the name of his daughter. His wife and his two daughters took off when he started mowing the lawn. And he didn't know it, but the youngest daughter wanted to spend time with daddy. So she had mom bring her back, and she hid in the bush. And he almost ran over his daughter with a lawnmower, but he heard an audible voice say, no, Brecken's in there. And he stopped and put the lawnmower down. He reached in there and found that it was his daughter. And boy, he hugged her like he was never going to let her go after that. That was a cool story. There's another moment where him and his wife were just destitute. I think this is before they were even on welfare. They were on welfare for a time, just trying to make ends meet and survive. And they got together with Dana and some other folks, and they said, we need to pray. We need to find a way to get some groceries, because our cupboards are actually bare. And as soon as everybody in the room and Eddie led off the prayer, in the first sentence, there's a knock at the door. And some dude that they knew just said, man, I just felt like I'm supposed to come over here and bring you some groceries. And that whole thing, the guy that came over and gave them groceries that they desperately needed, you know, he had that impression about 30 minutes before they even started praying. So God knows what you need before you even ask him. And that was such a cool story. There's some funny stories, just the mishaps. These guys were pioneers in the Christian hard rock genre. I believe that their album Straight On, that's my favorite of theirs, is in the top 100 Christian rock albums of all time list. And the song Living on the Edge of Dying is such a really cool Springsteen-esque rocker that's on that album. I met Eddie DeGarmo once, probably more than once, but one time I was in Nashville at GMA, and I was in a drugstore, and he walked in. I'm pretty sure he had some snakeskin cowboy boots on, his big long hair. This was in the time of his solo album, It Feels Good to Be Forgiven. And he came walking up to me, and I was wearing my King's X t-shirt, and he mentioned that Doug Pinnick was a great guy, that he's known him for a long time, blah, blah, blah. That was kind of fun. I knew some bands, you know, Forefront Records, even though they were clearly established as like a CCM label, you know, DC Talk was on that label, so was Audio Adrenaline. And but they also signed Holy Soldier and Grandma Train right in the middle of the 90s. You know, Grandma Train was this kind of a grunge-esque band from Seattle, and Holy Soldier had started out as a hair band and kind of transitioned to kind of a grunge sound with their Promise Man album. And both those albums are on there. So I remember hearing from the band members a lot, talking with Eddie, and you know, he was running the label back then. It's funny, the perspective I got from those guys is that Eddie was the man. He wasn't this rock and roll road warrior, but he was the man who said no to their marketing ideas and he ran the label. One time, long time ago, a really cool brother named Sammy Palermo, he's like a pastor at a Calvary Chapel Connected Church up in East Rochester, New York. So he flew me up there for some sort of pastor's conference or worship and musician conference, and I got to have my first garbage plate. They call these restaurants that serve just a bunch of food on a plate, a bunch of different meats and stuff, garbage plates, because they just pile it on. But Dana Key was the other guest speaker at that conference. I can't remember if there was a couple more folks, but I was real excited about meeting Dana Key because I wanted to tell him about how DeGarmo and Key had a very significant role in me coming back to Christ as a prodigal son. My story I've shared before many times was a prodigal son. I accepted Christ at age 11, lived for him real seriously for about 6 months, and then slowly but surely kind of walked away from the Lord and became the Lord of my own life. And you know, age 11 through age 20, I was doing my own thing and getting into rock and roll and getting high. And the summer of my 20th year, one of my friends that I'd met the previous summer had gotten right with God himself. And he kind of made me his own personal project. And he prayed for me. He fasted and prayed for me. He wept over the condition of my soul in prayer. And he shared with me lots of things about Jesus that I knew and respected. And he took me to a concert to see Mile in Favor and Broken Heart on the beach at Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I remember Dean Harrington, the guitar player for Mile in Favor, said, "Yeah, Christians are normal people too. We get horny too." And I asked him about that later, and he goes, "Yeah, man, some of the bathing suits those girls are..." But a little comment like that just made sense to me that, wow, you know, Christians can be real, and they don't hide behind the facade of pretending they've got it all together, but can be real about what they're going through. That was just one example. But I remember after that concert, my friend Greg thought this was it. It was all leading up to this concert, and but I didn't go forward at an altar call that I'm sure they had. I didn't rededicate my life that day, and but my friend thought, you know, this is what the whole summer of fasting and praying has been leading up to. And the next day I picked him up to go see a movie, and when I got to his house and he was getting in the car, I handed him a pipe, took a hit, and I said, "You want a hit?" And the look on his face, he was crushed. He was like a dad, completely disappointed in his son. Like, oh, he thought we'd made so much progress coming to the Lord, and here I was smoking weed, and obviously not there. But after the movie, there was some situations where we had to enter some spiritual warfare, and then we went over to his house and we talked some more. And he opened up the Bible and he said, "Read this, you know, keep reading it until it makes sense." And at one point he goes, you got it. And he said, and he gets this record. It was by DeGarmo and Key called "This Ain't Hollywood." And he said, "Man, these guys wrote this song several hundred miles from here, but they wrote it just for you." And he puts on the song, "You Gave Me All." And the lyrics to that song were like, "I knew your rules and I read your book, but my heart was as cold as steel. I learned to pray, but I did not kneel. But you gave me all." And that song really spoke to me because I'd kind of grown up, and all those years of being a prodigal, I was still going to church because I was forced to, and was ingesting the Word of God. But I wasn't bowing my knees to the King of Kings. And that night, I decided I'm going to do that. And I surrendered to Jesus. And anyway, I was able to tell Dana that story, that, you know, his song had an impact on me. And it felt really cool to be able to share that with with somebody, and you know, the response was kind of low key and humble, like, you know, I appreciate you sharing that. But I kind of noticed it a tiny bit, never thought about it again until I was reading this book. Come to find out that Eddie wrote the lyrics. So yeah, Eddie DeGarmo wrote the lyrics to that song, not Dana. I can imagine if I had written a song and somebody came to me and said, man, because of that song, I came to Christ, I would be like blown away. So anyway, so I owe a conversation to Eddie DeGarmo. So I want to tell him about how that song changed my life. Dana sang it to me, but Eddie wrote it. This is my car. Don't mess with those cats when they're driving, man. Now watch the Rockstars on God commercial.
Rockstars on God, caught in the fire, searching for me.